It's Two on the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, reviews of If There Is, I Haven't Found It Yet, and Chaplin. Plus, I get to go to the 2012 Broadway flea market. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two on the Aisle. Good evening. I'm Charles Gross.
And I'm the aforementioned Leslie Hoban Blake. Sorry.
Right. Our newly re-elected Drama Desk Vice President.
Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. Well, we have a lot to talk about today. How come no one can see me? Where am I? Okay,
there you are,
that's better. All right. We're going to start off with a new play presented by The Roundabout. It is called If There Is, I Haven't Found It Yet. And if there was a play up there, I'm not sure I found it yet either, because what I went to see. It's potentially interesting. It's about a family that, surprise, surprise, is dysfunctional. And the main problem is that the daughter is having a very hard time at school, and she ends up with severe problems. And the fact that her father is an environmental idiot, no other way to describe it, does not help. This is a guy who berates his wife. He's writing a book about, carbon footprints, and everything makes a carbon footprint to him. So his wife goes out and buys tomatoes. He said, "We have tomatoes in the greenhouse. Why didn't you use those?" She said, "They're no good. They're too small. They're green."
But when you mentioned the daughter, you didn't say what her dysfunction was. She's grossly overweight.
She's grossly overweight, and she's having trouble with the mean girls in the school. And when she retaliates, she's the one who gets suspended. Now,
mother doesn't understand her any better than father does.
Than the father,
yes.
No. And then there's the uncle. At least I think it's the uncle.
He is the
played
uncle.
by Jake
Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal, thank you. And that's the problem with the play. It's very incoherent. He comes on, his character comes on, talking with enough profanity to make a Mamet character blush in front of the 15-year-old daughter. And it turns out he's her uncle. And that is, we know he has a relationship with the family, but it takes several scenes to establish that. And the daughter's basic condition deteriorates. She attempts suicide in a very nicely staged scene, which I'll get to in a second. But the problem is the play is just so incoherent and really lacks focus. That despite empathizing with the girl, and I really get the teenage angst because I have two teenagers, so thank God none of them has ever made any suicide. But they've had
two pretty girls. You see,
yes,
there's the difference.
But even pretty girls can have problems in high school, as I have found out. Believe me, and they get depressed and they get upset and they, etc. But here's the interesting thing. The director, Michael Longhurst, Nick Payne, by the way, is the author.
It's a British play.
Yes, it's a British play. That's why they talk in British accents. Michael Longhurst starts the play with rain, and the first scene is the father talking about his obsession with polar bears. And there's in front a tank that I guess could be a polar bear tank, but
it's a tank of water.
Yes, it's a tank of water, and for the first for 2/3 of the play, at the end of every scene, a piece of furniture gets thrown in the water.
Well, but there's a jumble of furniture to start with.
Yes, there is.
And they pull down what they need for that scene, and then they throw it, when the scene is over, then they throw it in the water.
Right.
So there's a logic to that. Whether you like it or not, there's a logic to it.
I didn't see much point to it. It did to me.
It's a way of setting the stage.
I suppose, but again, did not enhance this play.
The
only time where the water really worked to me was during the scene where the daughter attempts suicide.
Right.
She's in a bathtub, and all of a sudden, the whole stage floods.
And
which
it stays
I found
flooded
throughout the entire. You can hear them slushing around. Very innovative, very creative, but not enough to save this play.
There was water splashing the same sort of way in a Sarah Rule play a couple of years ago, her Orpheus and Eurydice play. But they didn't make people walk around up to their knees in probably not very clean water for that long a period of. Well, they walk very
and
strangely when they come out to take their very carefully when they come out to take their
Their
you know,
bows.
if you're worried about whether they're getting wet or not, you know, and whether
I'm not.
no,
Honestly.
I was though. I wasn't watching the play anymore. I was worried about them. That's how unconnected to the play I was. That's what I'm trying
Well,
to say.
I was a little more connected to the play, but I was still very bored. I still could not get into the character. I thought the father was a total idiot. I mean, couldn't someone say schmuck?
Played by Tony winner Brian F. O'Byrne, by the way.
Yes, and played very nicely. And you know, the mother is Michelle Gomez. The daughter is very nicely played by Annie Frank. Excuse me, Annie Funk. But it's still a terribly boring play.
And there are lots
a
of silences,
and a
very long
inco-
silences.
And a very incoherent
Well,
play.
it-
And so while I must compliment the director on, you know, that very nice suicide scene, the rest of it really lacks focus.
I never thought I'd hear a sentence that talked about a nice suicide scene. But anyway, that I know what you mean.
But that had an impact. The rest of the play...
I didn't understand the gushing water at the end. I didn't, unless it's the polar ice caps melting before our very eyes, which I guess is what it was. I did not know why there were just gushes and gushes of water coming at us.
Well, this was during the suicide. I thought...
No, it started there, but then it stayed there through the end of the play.
Well, they
the
didn't
water
clean
was
it up.
there.
They didn't add any more.
But the water was literally
They didn't drain
knee-high.
it. Yes, they didn't
It was
drain
knee-high.
It
and
wasn't
not
quite that high tonight when I saw it this
well,
evening.
okay, because when I left and I saw it last week, they were down in the first and second rows. The first and second row floor was sopping wet of the theater, and I think maybe they put less water. It's possible that
I
hope
think they are
did.
using less water.
I hope they
and
did.
most of it falls into the tank.
Okay,
but
because
let me tell
that's
you
not what
something.
happened when I
Richard
saw it.
Rogers once said, "If a train steals your show, you don't have a show."
That's a very good. And if water gushing
and
steals
if you're paying
your show.
attention to the water,
Absolutely.
I think
Or
that
being
tells you something about the play or lack thereof.
And the big draw, of course, is Jake Gyllenhaal.
Right.
I bought a ticket for my sister because you couldn't get extra tickets, and it was sold out long before. And there are lines outside to see him, and he is lovely. But
he is no better, no worse than the other three cast members.
he was more interesting to me than the other two.
He was an interesting character, but again, not really developed enough. And again, not enough focus with him. Why is he talking this way to his niece?
Well, it's interesting.
With
He
all the
could very
profanity?
well be. His big initial role was Donnie Darko, and it's such a cult film that this could be Donnie Darko grown up. It really could, in a way. This is what may have happened, except that Donnie Darko didn't grow up. But sorry, I've spoiled the end of the movie for anybody who never saw it. But you know, that's what he could possibly be. There's a link to that character. Anyway, did you have any playbills you want to give to it, or?
1.5 is as far
Okay,
as I'm going to go.
I might go as far as 2, but I could stake with 1.5 as well. It was one of those plays where you walk out going, "What was that about? What did we just see?" And
Right.
you know, it was only 90 minutes long, but it felt a lot longer.
Yes, well, there was no intermission. And I don't know if there is. I haven't found it yet. I have no idea what that refers to after seeing the play.
Well, I thought it had to do with the girl. Like if there is, or maybe it's the again. If it's, you have to say maybe it's the uncle who's trying to help, but he doesn't have an answer. I think it's if there is an answer. I haven't found it yet. That's what I thought it meant. But
Could be.
You know, my guess is as good as yours, and vice versa.
Okay. Well.
So we